From San Antonio, Texas, home of the Alamo, the Riverwalk, and the World Heritage San Antonio Missions, this is the Exit Planning Coach podcast with John F. Dini. Designed to help advisors who work with business owners, John talks with top professionals in the exit planning field about best practices, marketing tips, and how to be more effective when working with owners. Now, here's John F. Dini.
Hi, and welcome to today's edition of the Exit Planning Coach podcast. My guest today is Kerry Boulton of the Exit Strategy Group in Melbourne, Australia. Kerry has over 15 million worth of sales and businesses she has successfully helped build over the last 3 decades. She was the first woman to manage and own an international freight forwarding company. She pioneered Nexus Business Coaching in 1996. That was well before, as we all know, business coaching was even a term. She's been a partner in 2 real estate agencies. And despite leaving school at 15, Kerry achieved a master's degree in entrepreneurship and innovation at the Australian Graduate School of Entrepreneurship in 1999. She was later invited to teach MBA students as an adjunct fellow at Swinburne University. Over the past 20 years, Kerry has mentored many owners through successful business growth, positioning them for their ultimate sale. She is a certified exit planning advisor, a family business advisor, and a professional EOS implementer. Kerry is also the author of 2 books, The Uncensored Truth About Exit Strategies and $1 Million Payday. Kerry, welcome. Glad to have you on the show.
Thanks, John. I'm thrilled to be here.
My first question for you. You're a successful business owner, a successful seller of businesses, a successful business coach. What made you decide to focus on the exit portion of coaching?
Yeah, it was one of those things after I'd been through a series of reinventions, I guess you might call it, in my life at different times, and having experience with family, being ill in business and all that sort of stuff. And I was getting back into coaching. I thought I'd get back into doing some coaching again. And I came across a press release, which was through PricewaterhouseCoopers, about baby boomers and not many people having exit plans and so forth. Anyway, I sort of then spent some time digging in a little bit and realized that there was just a huge gap in the market, that there was very little education available for any business owners around thinking about exit at all. And you didn't have to be too clever to look at the demographics and realize where the boom was coming, because the first baby boomers turned 65 in 2011. The peak is a few years away. 2028, as a matter of fact, is the peak. And then, of course, it's a 19-year trend. So it wasn't very hard to figure it out. Yeah. And I was really, really surprised that it wasn't something that people just did, or like that it was just one of those things that you did think about, because I personally learned about it when I had my first business, which was way back in 1987. I was doing a management buyout of a business. And I learned back then, if I needed to get investors to help me buy the business, I needed to give them an exit strategy. I needed to give them some idea of what my exit was going to be about. So it was always in my personal awareness, just all along. So it was quite a surprise, in fact, that people didn't know about it. And when I went around to do some more research to see what was out there, I went onto Amazon to see what books I could buy. And at the time, there were only 11 books. That's all about exit. I ordered them all, read them all. And that's so, yeah. And in fact, if you did a search today on Amazon, gosh, I don't know how many's there. I haven't even had a look, but be a lot more than 11 books today.
Oh, I was just doing a search today for another reason, and there was more than 40, I know.
Correct.
That's just what popped up. Was one of them the $10 trillion opportunity?
Of course it was, with Peter Christman. Yeah, of course.
that was the one. that Peter Chrisman and Richard Jackman book was the one that really started me looking into the area.
Yeah.
I had a partner at the time, and we were business brokers, and he came to me and showed me the book, and he said, "We're going to make a fortune as business brokers." I said, unfortunately, his idea was, we'll just stand here and everybody will come to us. That didn't turn out to be the best business development
work
strategy.
that way, does it? No,
No.
And you'd also realize, as would probably most of the advisors listening to this, that the word exit is also something that doesn't particularly resonate with people, or it becomes it's a little confronting, which is something I discovered as time went on. It's now becoming, people are getting a bit more comfortable with it, but certainly 5, 6, up to 10 years ago, people weren't terribly comfortable with that whole word exit, but yeah.
Certainly. 10 years ago, when I talked about exit planning, nobody knew what I was talking about.
Correct. So we're both pioneers in terms of being at the early stages, being ahead of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there still aren't nearly enough of us for the.
No.
I don't know what your demographics. I know what the demographics look like in Australia because they're very similar to US, but
Yeah.
I don't know what the gross numbers are in Australia. But in the US, we are still looking at about 2.7, 2.8 million businesses owned by boomers, owned by people 56 years old or older.
It's hard to break down the numbers in terms of sizes, but we are around 1.5 million. Yeah.
Wow. Yep. That's a lot. Considering you're a country of, what are you, 24 million now?
26. Yeah.
26. Yeah.
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 So
that's the tremendous piece of the population. You talk about exit being a tough word to get around, or we don't get around it. As a matter of fact, in my new book, it said, you can call it transition, you can call it succession, you can call it whatever. It's exit. You're exiting. Let's call it what it is.
Yep.
But what's your typical first meeting with a client look like? So
typically, a client will have found me, either they're just searching and they've found me on the web, or they've ordered my book, which is the one I use, which we talked about, just mentioned earlier, which is this one.
Right.
And that's a lead generation book. Now, since we're talking to advisors, it's only small, 10 myths. And I send it out as a book. It's not an ebook. And the reason for doing that is because it sits around. Ebooks get lost in the ether of the files on your computer. So send them out as I did a physical book, and they have it, and then whether they read it straight away or not. But generally speaking, they've been on my database for some time. And in fact, it was about 3 weeks ago. This is what happens. People are on your database. I've got a nurture cycle going, so they're still hearing from me. You're just there in front of them, and then they'll contact you. So yes, about 3 weeks ago, I had someone reach out who's been on my database since 2018 and has my book, gets my emails, sees posts on LinkedIn, follows me there as well. And he's reached the stage that he's 56, and now he wants to start doing an exit plan. So if it's feasible, I will set up a meeting, and if they're locally here in Melbourne, I'll meet them personally, because I like to do that to start with. But then everything else I do after that's pretty much virtual. But if they're not local, I just meet them virtually on Zoom. So the first meeting is always the exploratory meeting.
Sure. You say client from 2018. I tell centers of influence, referral sources, especially bankers, I am happy to come out and spend an hour with you and your client. Because you will learn more about what I do. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm just banking your client, because if they don't want to do anything today, they will eventually. you know, the classic John Brown from BEI line, sooner or later, every owner exits the business.
Correct.
So I consider them all to be backlogged because someday they're going to call me. Yeah.
Sure. It's just, I think it's about understanding that it's a long lead time, and people will contact you when they're ready. It's nothing, you can't force anything on people at all.
Right.
You know,
Right.
So they'll contact you when they're ready, and then hopefully you've sown enough seeds for them to realize that it's not something that's a 24-hour, you know, oh, I need an exit plan. Okay, I'll meet you and I'll have one tomorrow. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I usually mention in the first meeting, just because you have a plan doesn't mean you have to execute it right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
just knowing you have a plan, and then you decide when the time is right.
Yeah, exactly. Just give it some thought and realize there's a few things that, you know, are really good business decisions to put in place, because it's really a business strategy. That's what it is, as much as anything else. But as you well know, it's, you know, takes time if you've got to do some things, you know, in terms of making sure your structures are right. Is it, you know, your personal readiness, financial readiness, business readiness, etc. So, you know, those things take time if you have to make some changes. Yeah.
Well, then when I was a broker, you know, of course, as a broker, you always get these people that call you up and say, I'm ready to sell my business. You know, can you do it in 30 days?
Yeah.
You know, but they always ask in the interview, they say, what should I do to make my business worth more?
Yeah.
And the answer is exactly what you should have been doing for the last 20 years. You know?
Yep. Exactly.
So when you have somebody that's going, I don't know if this is the time, that sounds right, I know I need to do this, we all hear it over and over again. Do you have any particular argument or method that turns a prospect into a client?
Look, I take a fairly pragmatic approach all the time, and I simply say what you just said before. You know, it's not about taking instant action. It's about taking time to think about what all the options are going forward. And usually I go into some stories, frankly, because the stories of people who've had different sorts of experiences usually resonate, you know, well. So, in fact, the people I saw yesterday, they did the questionnaire, the initial assessment, which of course I had the information, which is terrific. And our conversation got around to, well, what are you going to do next? And of course, he'd said he was working 55, 60 hours a week, you know, so we were able to go down that pathway. And I tell the story, which is of my uncle, actually, which is perfectly true, where he at his peak, he had 14 different companies and 500 staff. And it took him 10 years to actually get himself out of it. And he regretted not having started that process, that, you know, 10 years before he even started it then. He wished he'd started it 20 years before that, you know. So, so I find that if I can relate some stories, you know, to people, and they'll usually realize that there is something to do. And you can be gentle. You just start gently with it, you know, and hey, as soon as they've done the questionnaire and as soon as you've gone through some of the details of the assessment, then they realize that, wow, I really do have a lot of work to do. So they go forward from there.
Right. You know, I'm supposed to, I've been asked to guest on a podcast from Mass Mutual later this week. And it was almost like a setup. They said, would you be willing to talk about owner centricity? And I was like, oh, sure. No problem.
Absolutely. And you know what? It doesn't matter what the size of the business is. I have another client who's we call them tradies. I'm not sure whether you call them that in the US, tradespeople that do.
Yeah, the trades.
Yeah. And so they have, I've known the owner of this business for 25 years. And all along, I've talked to him about doing something, in terms of figuring out what an exit's going to be for him, because otherwise you just shut shop, that's the bottom line. And about 18 months ago, okay, Kerry, I need to do something about it now, because he wants to have his team actually buy the business out from him over a period of time.
Okay.
That's the strategy.
An MBO, I like those.
Yeah, exactly. Which of course is ideal for that type of business.
Sure.
And so we had to then, we've started a process of actually educating those people about business, because they don't know,
Right.
And as he said, you don't know what you don't know, so, and he wished he'd done it years ago. It's the same story over and over again.
Yeah. When we're doing contractors, we, and we're doing a management buyout, and we expect to get financing for it. One of the things we have to build, because of the SBA regulations, the SBA wants to see documentation that they can handle the company if they're going to get a government loan for the acquisition. So we always have to build two plans. One is for the transition of the ownership. The other one's for the transition of the management responsibilities.
Correct. Yeah.
Prove that they know how to run it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me take a break here. We do the part that pays for the podcast, and I'm really enjoying this, and I'll be right back in just a second. Hello, John F. Dini here, and I'm very excited to announce the publication of the Exit Planning Coach Handbook. Inspiration for the handbook comes from my 25 years of working as a coach to business owners, with 12 of those years dedicated to helping them plan their business transitions. It is a guide for advisors that explains why working with business owners is so dramatically different from working with other executives. It provides insights on how to approach planning conversations with owners more effectively. Plus, it takes you through the steps that will help you develop your relationship as their most trusted advisor. I wrote this book for advisors who want their clients to move on to a second act that's even more rewarding than their first. If you read any of my previous books, you know I don't lecture. It's a conversation between two professionals. If you work with business owners, I strongly encourage you to read the Exit Planning Coach Handbook. I think it will quickly become a go-to in your reference library. It will be released on January 15th, 2023, but is available right now for pre-order in the Kindle store on Amazon. Welcome back. I'm here with Kerry Boulton of Melbourne, Australia, from the Exit Strategy Group. And Kerry, although we're going to have your information obviously posted on the podcast and everywhere else, why don't you give us a quick website and email where people can reach you if they want to talk to you? Sure.
The website is theexitstrategygroup.com.au.
Okay.
And email is kerry@theexitstrategygroup.com.au. And Kerry is Kerry.
Okay.
For US listeners.
Very, very good. Did you come up with that methodology yourself, or? We talked a little bit, and I'd like to talk some more about marketing for new business. You said people call you up and you send them a book. Great idea. How do they know to do that? How do they know to call you? How do they know to ask?
I think it's probably worthwhile reflecting when I go back to right when I started. And my book was always my lead generation tool. I had that right from the beginning. And so what I did was actually approach other groups who were already talking to my audience. So I think in marketing terms, they call it other people's networks. So I approached those people and was able to do what I call a joint venture marketing with them, where I did an email blast, a few email blasts really to start with, where I gave them, I wrote the letter so it made life easier for them, where they endorsed the book and recommended it to their clients. And of course it was free. So they were seen as doing a good thing to, for their client list. And basically right at the beginning that went out to, I think it went out on email to about 1,500 people, and I had 112 requests back then for the book. I also do a lot of talks in front of business audiences. So once again, I went around looking for groups that were already talking to my potential audience, and I would get up on stage and do presentations to a lot of those people. And that's another way as well. And it's been an accumulation, of course, over time, because I've been doing this now since 2012. So it's 10 years,
it goes by quick.
Yeah, it does. It does. But yes. And, wherever I go, I just give it to them. And in fact, I don't actually have one at my fingertips now, but my business card is also a promotion for the book. I should have grabbed one out before to show you. So it's a landing page, which is just freeexitstrategybook.com.au. So if anyone would like a copy, they can go to that URL, freeexitstrategybook.com.au, and I will send them a copy of the book.
Great. And I like the idea of a hard copy too.
Sure.
Yeah, because people put it aside, but they won't throw it away.
No, that's exactly right. So, it's basically been approaching other people to get them to promote for me in terms of being able to offer the book, doing something in return that's going to be of value to them, and finding business groups that you can talk to, which I've done many times. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Luncheon speakers are always in demand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before, during, or after a planning engagement, or maybe all three, what attributes would you describe about your ideal client?
So we're not talking to one-person businesses. We're not talking to really tiny businesses.
Sure.
I think the metrics might be pretty similar in the US. On my setup, when someone, say, orders the book, I've got a few filters in there, and if they're doing $1 million plus, there's a little drop-down menu, just has some broad categories of revenue. If they're doing $1 million and over, the system automatically offers them the opportunity to make an appointment to have a free consultation via Zoom. So generally speaking, they're business owners who have been obviously around for a while, been going for quite a few years. They're very likely in their 50s, around 50 plus, and all of a sudden starting to think about there's coming a time when they're going to have to get out of their business. And how do I exit? What do I do? What do I have to do? Can I do that? So they're starting to think about it, but it's not necessarily next week or next year.
Sure.
It can, a long lead time. And some of them I've found have already done some research and have sort of the bones of a plan, and they want someone that they can bounce that off as well. Yeah. But yeah, mainly I would say the demographic is that they're usually in their 50s or 60s, and there could have been a health scare. There's been a catalyst somewhere along the line, mostly. Yeah.
I find the same thing. One of the dismal Ds is looming. Who is your best referral source besides your book? You must get referrals.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of referrals, I have to say. I don't know why it is that some people are terribly guarded about it. I think, it seems to be that it's maybe a personal thing. And I don't know, maybe it's different in the US, but in Australia, accountants tend to see themselves as the exit planners, so they don't refer anybody, especially because they think you're going to steal their client, when in fact you're not. Of course, you're going to in fact enhance the relationship with the accountant. The main source really is getting in front of business groups, really doing talks, doing sort of quite regular talks. Yeah. And the clients that I have do refer their friends. That's what happens.
Yeah. We
So
found
it's not really a center of
in
influence.
our national survey here in the US, which we'll be doing in February for the third time. Number one referral sources were other professionals. Number two was past clients. Just to wind up here, and we're going to come back and we're going to do this again. And we're thinking about doing some panels too. I think I'd love to have you participate in one of those where we're going to take a topic and have a couple of advisors talk about it and get some different opinions, because we all learned from that. But lots of people are adding exit planning to their skill sets. I mean, you're a CEPA. You see how many CEPAs are getting minted every month, and you see how many of those are not experienced business consultants. They're really trying to learn about exit planning so they can have the conversation. What is your best advice to someone who's just beginning in exit planning? If
you have some experience of your own, clearly that's one of the greatest advantages, really, more than anything. But if you're just starting out, you get some stories from people. Get some stories that you can relate, that are examples of good and bad, experiences that people have had, so that you can turn the matter of fact information into something to which they can relate more closely. So because the client's not necessarily going to reveal everything to you straight away. That's for sure.
What?
Surprise. But you might find that by relating a few stories, you'll start to find out deeper information, because we're individuals, and we all know that these experiences are ones that don't happen necessarily just to other people, that they could happen to us. But talking about them matter of factly, there's that barrier, there's that layer in front of it.
So safety margin.
Yeah. Whereas the stories I find get through, they cut through.
I love stories. I mean, stories are the oldest form of education. People used to go, the only way people got news was with the guy that would go from town to town and tell them stories about what was going on.
Exactly. And, I see my role as an educator. That's where I see my role, because people just don't know. And it is the old adage, you don't know what you don't know. And so that's how I really approach it. I approach it as an educator, really, rather than someone who can do something. Because let's face it, what we do is we ask questions. That's what we do. We ask questions, and we put their answers together in the form of a strategy and a process that they can follow. But at the end of the day, we have to educate rather than just pose theory. We have to educate in the real world.
I've got to tell you, I finish every initial interview with a new guest with that question: what would you tell people? And that is the best single piece of advice I have heard to date.
Oh, very good.
That's an excellent. Get stories and be able to tell them.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure today, Kerry. I'm looking forward to have you again. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you, John. Yeah.
And anybody that wants to get in touch with Kerry, all her stuff, all her information and contact information will be on the podcast. Just recall that for us here in Central Time, you're 16 hours ahead?
Yeah, depending on daylight saving.
Yes, something like that. So don't call her in the middle of the night, please.
Well, I won't answer. As simple as that.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Kerry. It's been a pleasure,
Right.
and I'll talk to you again soon.
Terrific. Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.